Just a reminder that when you're done with the lecture, take the quiz that's posted on Edline. And here is a little preview of the questions on that quiz. By previewing the questions, you can see exactly what you should be listening for as you watch the video. Do you look more like your mom or your dad? Apparently, this baby's grandmother is horrified that he looks more like his father. Or maybe you look most like one of your siblings. Regardless of who in your family you most closely resemble, you don't look exactly like them. But you also probably don't look like a 50-50 mix of your parents. You did get 50% of your DNA from your mom and 50% of your DNA from your dad. We'll spend this next unit looking at exactly why you look the way you do. There are still a lot of unanswered questions that researchers are still trying to figure out. So don't be upset if by the end of the unit you still can't figure out why you're the only one in your family with green eyes, or where that weird birthmark came from. So to begin by talking about why you look the way you do, we need to go back to the very beginning, your beginning. Really, even before your beginning. How did the two cells that eventually joined to become you take shape? The process by which specialized reproductive cells divide to become sperm and egg is called meiosis. It's similar to mitosis, but there's a few important differences. Every human has 46 chromosomes in their cells, except for reproductive cells. Different organisms have different numbers of chromosomes. Chimps have 48 chromosomes, fruit flies have 8, and dogs have 78 chromosomes. So you can see that chromosome number doesn't really relate to how advanced an organism is. The 46 chromosomes that we have exist in pairs, and one from each pair we got from each of our parents. So the number of chromosomes an organism has in their reproductive cells, or the number of chromosomes from one parent, is called the haploid number of chromosomes. It's sometimes abbreviated N to represent one set of chromosomes. When two reproductive cells come together to form an individual, that individual now has two sets of chromosomes. This number of chromosomes found in most cells of your body is called the diploid number of chromosomes, and it's sometimes represented by a 2N because diploid means two sets. The way that I remember which word is which is half and haploid each start with an H, and haploid is half of diploid. Diploid and double both start with a D, and diploid means double of haploid. That means that in humans, the haploid number and number of chromosomes is 23. Each egg and sperm has 23 chromosomes. Eggs and sperm are also called gametes. All of the other cells in your body are called somatic cells and have a diploid or 2N number of chromosomes. In humans, that's 46. The process that produces gametes with only 23 chromosomes is called meiosis. Before we get into the details of what happens, there are some things we need to review about chromosomes. Each chromosome, or X shape, contains two copies of a particular chunk of all of the cell's DNA. That's why these chromosomes have two identical colored bands, one of them on each sister chromatid. The colored band represents a gene, or a section of DNA that codes for a particular protein or group of proteins. We used to say that a gene coded for a trait, but the more scientists study genes and traits, the more they see that the relationship is not that simple. We'll get a little more into this during our modern genetics unit. Each chromosome also has a partner. That's what's shown in the picture. So on this, one of this pair came from the child's mother, and the other came from the child's father. The DNA on these chromosomes are not identical, but it is similar. That's why the bands on the chromosomes are light green and dark green, light purple and dark purple, and light blue and dark blue. They represent the same traits, but have different forms of that trait, like blue and brown eyes. These pairs of chromosomes are called homologous chromosomes. Humans have 23 homologous pairs. The process of meiosis is divided into two parts, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. During meiosis 1, a specialized sex cell, which will divide once, And in meiosis II, each of the two new cells will also divide, producing a total of 4 cells. Interphase occurs before meiosis I, but not in between meiosis I and II. The two pictures show two different ways chromosomes can split during meiosis. It's a little hard to see, but there's two homologous pairs in this cell that we're starting out with. In the first scenario, the dark purple and orange chromosome go to one cell, and the maroon and dark purple go to another cell. In the second scenario, the opposite happens. The light purple and orange end up in one cell, and the dark purple and maroon are in the second cell. This is one way that genetic variation is introduced in organisms that reproduce sexually. When homologous pairs separate during meiosis, it's random which of the chromosomes end up in each of the two cells. Each cell must always get one chromosome from each pair. Otherwise, the cells would be missing important DNA. Here's another picture of the same process. This time, the small chromosomes are a homologous pair, and the large chromosomes are another homologous pair. The red are chromosomes from the person's mother, and the blue are chromosomes from the person's father. Now imagine the cell divides so that one cell pulls away from the top and a second cell pulls away from the bottom. So the top cell would have a small red chromosome and a large blue chromosome, and the bottom cell would have a small blue chromosome and a large red chromosome. But the red and blue chromosomes can line up anyway as long as each daughter cell gets one big and one small. This is a simple example where there's only two homologous pairs of chromosomes, but imagine how many options there are in humans with 23 pairs of chromosomes. The arrangement of the chromosomes during metaphase of meiosis I is just one way variation is introduced in sexually reproducing organisms. The second way is through the process of crossing over, and this happens during prophase of meiosis I, or prophase I. Crossing over involves a homologous pair swapping the tips of their chromatids. This can only happen between homologous pairs because it's switching DNA for the same traits. If chromosomes that weren't homologous switched DNA through crossing over, one cell wouldn't end up with two copies of DNA for each trait, and that's necessary for a normally functioning individual. Okay, finally, the whole process of meiosis. First, interphase happens, just like it does before mitosis begins. In G1, the cell grows, and in S, all of its DNA is copied, and then in G2, the cell checks for mistakes and prepares for division. Then comes meiosis I. The phases of meiosis are very similar to mitosis. The one after each stage shows that this is meiosis I. In prophase, chromosomes become visible, the nuclear membrane breaks down, and centrioles move to opposite sides of the nucleus, all just like prophase of mitosis. But there's two differences. First of all, tetrads form. This means that homologous chromosomes find their partner. A tetrad is just another name for homologous chromosomes during meiosis. Secondly, crossing over takes place. The next phase is metaphase I. So just like mitosis, chromosomes line up in the center. This is where they line up randomly on either side of the imaginary line through the center of the cell, creating diversity among gametes. Spindle fibers also attach to the centromere during metaphase I. This is just a little bit later than during mitosis. Spindle fibers attach during prophase of mitosis. Anaphase I comes next. This is also slightly different. In meiosis I, homologous chromosomes get separated so that the resulting cells will each have 23 chromosomes instead of 46. During mitosis, each chromosome splits in half at the centromere. Telophase I is identical to mitosis. It's just and it's just backwards of what happens in prophase. The spindle disappears, chromosomes decondense, and the nuclear membranes form. Cytokinesis, or the division of the cytoplasm, also happens at this time. So now there are two cells that are each different from each other and have half the number of chromosomes that we started with, so they're haploid. And each cell has two copies of the DNA. Each of those two cells will now go through meiosis II. I know this is getting a little long, so all I'll say about meiosis II is that it's identical to mitosis. By the end of meiosis II, there's 4 gametes, which are haploid and have only one copy of the DNA. The gamete is now prepared to join with another gamete from the opposite gender. In males, the process of meiosis is continuous, beginning at puberty. In females, meiosis I actually happens before the female is born, and meiosis II is only completed during fertilization, if fertilization occurs.